Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Strategy Factory. I am Lucas Goransky, and today I'll be talking with Guillermo Hermosillo. Guillermo is a global innovation director at Burger King. He's in Miami, if I'm not wrong. So, Guillermo, good afternoon. How are you? And thank you for your time.
Hi, Lucas. Thanks for inviting me to join you here today for the discussion. Really happy to be sharing some of our findings, our insights, and the experience in general.
That's awesome, Guillermo. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. There's a lot of topics that I want to talk about, but I want to start with something that I know is very dear to you, which is branding. So I would like to know, in your opinion, what are the key elements to having a successful and robust branding strategy?
Sure, no, and I think it's a great starting point for the chat, Lucas. I've had the pleasure of working with several global brands across several years in my career and in different geographies. So it's been an interesting journey so far. I've had the pleasure of working from diaper brands to nowadays hamburgers, right, within the fast food business, having the honor of managing the global portfolio for innovation in BK and handling iconic products like the Whopper, right? In the past, I've also worked with other brands like Pedigree, which are very iconic as well within the pet care and pet food portfolio and category. So one thing that has been a common element across all of the different categories, brands, and companies that I've worked with is the need for a robust strategy in order for that strategy to serve the brand's needs and therefore then the business. So it all starts with understanding very clearly what are the pain points that your consumer, or in my case now in BK, our guest is looking for or is having, right? So what are these things that are triggering, what are these insights that are triggering the pain points that your brand is either solving or not solving to its full extent, right? So it all starts with the consumer and the proper consumer understanding, right? So if you put the consumer in the center of what you're doing, then you have a higher chance of landing in a strategy that's very well cemented and that has the right communication, the right portfolio, the right pricing, and the right approach to be able to win in the landscape. You can imagine that all categories, this is true for everyone, are more competitive nowadays, more brands playing, and clearly, I mean, the world has become more flat in many ways, right? So it used to be a world where to play in the consumer good industry, you needed a very powerful brand and a lot of investment, right? And we have nowadays cases where there have been smaller brands that have grown to be very, very relevant because they knew and they understood what was a consumer or a category pain point, and they triggered that particular pain point and brought to life a strategy that without massive funding became breakthrough within the categories that they play. So to me, going back to your original question, first of all, and most importantly, you need the proper level of detail and understanding of the guest and consumer insights. And from there, you start building the strategy around the brand positioning, right? What does your brand stand for in the mind and the heart of those consumers, right? What is the right portfolio to serve the consumers or the guests' needs, right? Do you need a big package of diapers to serve X channel or Y channel? Do you need a Whopper that has 1 meat, 2 meats, triple cheese, double cheese? Do you need something beyond the Whopper to serve the needs of guests that are looking for something more premium? And the same way in the pet food category, right? So you need to play with a strong portfolio of dry food for dogs and cats, and then also wet food, right? But it all starts and gets linked back to the original point, which is guests or dog owners or consumers have several needs, and we need to understand them as marketeers in order for us to be able to bring to life the strategy that addresses that need, and for you to get, first of all, the awareness as a brand, then the consideration, right? I know Pedigree, I know Burger King, I know Pampers. Okay, perfect. Is it something or a brand or something that I consider in my set of options or not, right? Then comes consideration in the funnel, right? And then we move to the T out of the funnel, which is a trial. So it's a very common and practical approach to it, which is awareness, consideration, and trial, right? And the trial is what actually triggers the sale. So a strong branding strategy needs to start to be with a rooting in a strong consumer insight. It has to come to life with the right brand understanding, right? What do guests think of from your brand? And then how do you communicate that in a way for people to have awareness of your brand, consider you, and then generate a transaction or a purchase?
Amazing. I'm guessing that then the next natural step is obviously them being advocates, hopefully, loving your brand and then also pushing for your brand. There's one thing that I'm curious for. There's probably an explanation, but the reason why you guys call guests instead of customers is that yeah? Can you tell us the background of that, or what's the reason?
Sure. I think it has to do with this entire concept about us wanting every person who walks into any given BK, if it's either in Australia, in Hungry Jack's, or in the US, or in Mexico, or in Brazil, or anywhere in the world. We operate in many countries. Being a global brand, it's a lot of fun, but it's connected to the fact that we want everyone to feel special and feel like a king when they come inside any of our restaurants. So it's this concept of you enter the kingdom, you feel special, you feel like a guest. Lucas comes in and he can have the Whopper he's ordering his way, right? And his way means without pickles, or with 2 patties of meat, or a plant-based patty, you know, if you're going to try our plant-based portfolio. So this concept of guests has to do with how we want people to feel whenever they walk into a restaurant. And it has to do also with this element that you just mentioned, which is the becoming advocates, or what we call as well also the frequency, right? So you come out of any of these places within any given day that you join us in any BK as a guest, you ask for your food, you feel special, and then you come back. The chances of you coming back with a higher frequency are extremely higher if you feel special, if you were fulfilled when it comes to the craving that you have for your food, if your Whopper was as good as it has ever been, etc. So it comes to that, it's super connected with this concept of guest experience, which is we want people to feel the most special that they can in any given visit.
That's awesome. And it's such a small change, not calling someone a customer and calling them a guest. But obviously behind it is such a powerful difference. And obviously the way that you think about them is not just changing the name, but it's also making sure that that change in denomination makes sense behind it. So that's incredibly powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
I have an additional point on that. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think it comes like a great segue here. So imagine that we work in the office, right? We dream about the portfolio, we land on the strategy, we build great PowerPoints that are rooted into data, but then everything happens in any given restaurant through the crew that is operating there, right? So just calling the guests and giving the crew the right training and the right mindset for them to really make sure that this strategy comes to life in the restaurant makes a whole different story. You know, we need to evangelize basically the crew, because they're the ones who are in contact with any given guest in any country. So sorry to point that out, but I thought it was important to mention.
No, absolutely, super important. I wonder, because obviously you've been involved in branding and in big brands for a long time now, and I wonder what has been the biggest change you've seen in the last 10 years? Do you think that the concept of branding, or the way that we see branding, has changed dramatically in the last 10 years? Or is it been pretty much the same, which is basically listening to the customer and really understanding what their pain points are?
I think there's a few things that have changed, but there's a few others that remain the cornerstone of branding and building global brands, right? So the one you just mentioned, which is connecting, understanding your consumer, connecting yourself as a brand to the consumer and guest insights that you have, remains to be, I think, the single most important truth that any given brand in any category needs to continue doing, right? Because the moment you're either blind or not listening, then you open the door for others to come and do a better job. And then, as I mentioned, it's a very competitive environment out there. But there's other elements towards branding that I think have, I wouldn't say changed, but have evolved a lot. We have different new trends, right, that have reshaped the way that branding and marketing is done recently, right? And I think the digital landscape or the digitalization of the world has brought those changes and accelerated those changes in a massive way. I can talk to you about several of them, one of them being, for example, personalization, right? Personalization is this attribute or this characteristic that has become as relevant as ever, right? Because guests now, they should feel more special. They have, I mean, we brands have a responsibility to attract people to our restaurants, right? So people want to feel more special. People want to feel that BK is talking to me in a way that no other brand within the fast food business can talk to me, that or that they can prepare a meal that it is only tailor-made for me, right? And we have seen this in many categories and in many brands. I think, I mean, I can call out a few examples from other categories. Like, I mean, Nike has done a great job in terms of personalization. I recall this great campaign of, I think it was either Chicago or Berlin marathon, but they did a whole campaign around Lucas running the marathon, and they put several cameras along the route, and it was, in the end, they would send you a specific video of Lucas running that particular marathon. It was I mean, nobody else had the same race. Everybody ran in the same track, but it was personalized for you, right? In our case, in BK, we have a unique opportunity here because the Whopper and our restaurant itself and our brand was born with the mantra of having it your way, you know, and we want, again, everyone to feel special. And the personalization angle is now more relevant than ever, right? And now there's different, the experience can be different because you can order via delivery and you are expecting it to come to your home and arrive in good shape, a perfect temperature, and having it your way, right? It shouldn't be a detractor. The delivery form shouldn't be a detractor of the experience per se. So personalization, I think, has changed the way that many companies look at guest services, look at customer experience. That's one thing that has changed, I think, dramatically. And we need to be sure as brands and as marketeers that we offer as much personalization as we can in order to fulfill these needs and to make people feel special and people return as frequent guests or frequent consumers. So that's one that has changed, and that the digital landscape has enabled that personalization in many ways. The other angle is convenience. Brands, we have a commitment and a responsibility to be as convenient as we can be, right? And I'm not thinking of convenience as a simple experience, right? But I think we need to think of as convenience. I mean, people now are exposed to crazy agendas. People are busy, you know, and they have different expectations. So the convenience angle is also something that has become very relevant when it comes to the brand strategy angle, because people want what they want, the way they want it. And whoever or whichever brand or business is able to deliver that brand is going to get the love, you know, and the love back and the frequency and the trial and the repeat. So I think these two angles, personalization and convenience, are two of the most important elements that have reshaped within the marketing and brand building landscape.
That's great. And I was thinking of the role of social media, right? And how we all want to belong to a community, but we want to have our personalized, we want to be unique. We want to have a certain touch. And I think that's something that was really triggered or really pushed by social media, and this idea of we belong to the same tribe. We all use Instagram, or we all use, but all of us have our own profile picture and we have our own way. And what maybe 40, 50 years ago with our parents, it was more about building a community and feeling cared for and being surrounded and not being different. It was being part of. Now it's how can I belong to something, but have it my way. So that's fabulous. And while you were talking, you were talking about convenience, and you were talking obviously about all the digital part, the transformation. I want to go a little bit into that topic because here in Australia, for example, during the pandemic, all of the shops, supermarket, not except supermarkets, but the stores and food places, Hungry Jack's here. For everyone that doesn't know, in Australia, Burger King is called Hungry Jack's, but Hungry Jack's here, they were closed. They were only open for takeaway or delivery. So I'm guessing that the experience that you guys were offering with your crew changed dramatically. So how could you take that experience from coming in, feeling part of the kingdom, to then kind of delivering that experience, delivering the part of the kingdom. So I want to ask you about specifically what happened during COVID and what was those specific things that you guys learned, but also about the digital transformation and how a company so big as Burger King and so used to the, let's call it offline interactions or face-to-face interaction, have a digital transformation so that people can take the full experience home or just on a takeaway.
Sure, I'll respond that in three angles. The first one is going to be the data angle. The second one is going to be the channels or emerging channels angle, and the third one will be portfolio or portfolio strategy. So the first one is when it comes to data, right? So now more than ever, it became evident that and with the reshaping of things after COVID or during COVID, as things, I mean, the rules of the game changed dramatically, not just in Australia. I can tell you, Lucas, at that time I was managing the Mexico business for BK, and we had a huge change of rules from night to day, right? Everything was closed. People were in panic. There was a lot of non-information about what you could do or should do, right? And that basically paralyzed the business, right? So the power of data became something that started to be in the center of our digital transformation strategy. So we completely reshaped the overall brand strategy and focused on setting up our own digital ecosystem in a proper way, starting with the ability to capture, nurture, and utilize data to be able to serve as many guests as possible, and then know these guests as good as we could know them, and then retargeting them as best as we could. So we started out with setting up our digital ecosystem through a CRM stack. So we had a mobile app, but it was a mobile app that was very basic when it comes to functionalities. You could do couponing, but in reality, we were a bit blind when it comes to who was that person redeeming that coupon in a certain point in time, right? So the power of data became very evident because we didn't have people coming into the restaurants, right? And we wanted to serve all of these people. And sometimes we were serving these people, but we were serving these guests through others, like the Uber Eats, DoorDash, or Grubhubs of the world, right? But we also wanted to be able to know these diners and know them as good as we could be. So we set up our digital ecosystem in a way that we could gather, capture, and codify properly the data. Who was Lucas, who was Guillermo, who was Maria, who was everyone who was interacting with us as a brand, from our social media channels to our downloading our app and giving us more information and giving away these few megabytes in their cell phones, right? So we centralized everything and we established a CRM stack that will allow us to capitalize on that data as much as possible. And that required a lot of transformation inside out because we needed to change the structure within, hired a few people to focus on the digital angle, people that had experience that help us navigate this. I had to hire a couple of people for my team. In this setup, we also have, I would say, a very interesting journey when it comes to data analysis, right? How do we cluster these guests? These people who are consuming 2 times a week or 2 times a month, or should you talk to them in the same way? Should you send him or her a push notification with what tone of voice? How do we do A/B testing in terms of to understand the right frequency? How do we talk to them even in hours of the day, right? When should we reach these people and maximize the open rate of a single push notification or an email message with our email marketing strategy? So going back to the point on data, the transformation started with having the right tools to be able to gather, use, analyze, and nurture this data strategy as best as we could. Then the second piece of the strategy had to do with the emerging channels, right? As you mentioned, people were prohibited from eating there and feeling like a king eating in the restaurant, right? So we repurposed our efforts towards 2 emerging channels. First one is delivery, own and through third parties, both, because both are super, super, super important. And then the other channel is drive-through. So drive-through I can tell you about how relevant it was for Mexico. It was around 12, 13% of the sales prior to COVID. And then when everything exploded, we got to a point where it was about 30, right? So people were indeed looking for the experience of eating BK, right? And if they couldn't do it going to the restaurant, they wanted to do it through the means that were available at the time. So it was our responsibility to be able to serve their needs in the best way possible. So that required a big change when it comes to an operational angle to ensure that if the lines are going to be longer, right, in the drive-through, we need to equip the crew to be able to solve this amount of orders in a faster way, right? And establish a new set of procedures inside that could speed up the work. There was also the angle related to health and safety, right? So we needed to sanitize the restaurants and all of the critical areas in a, extremely more frequent way than before, because guests are worried about these brands, are they taking care of me? And yes, that was the most important piece, and it was in the center of the strategy, right? So the same thing applies to both delivery and drive-through, the safety and the health part that completely intensified, I would say, our efforts when it comes to cleaning, sanitizing, and ensuring that the experience was as best as it could be for our guests. And then the other side had to do with having the right portfolio for those channels, right? So when you walk into any BK, and I think this is connected with the third point, right? The portfolio points, right? The channels we've talked, and then the portfolio point. When you walk into any BK, you're standing in front of the menu and you can see, and there's always this element of impulse, right? Wow, this is a new hamburger with guacamole. I can't wait to try it, right? But then when you're navigating your cell phone in any given delivery platform, the amount of information you're exposed to can be overwhelming. So we needed to also reshape and work in this test and learn roadmap to define what are the hamburgers and the menu items that need to be there, and which ones we should really move away from, because they will only pollute the experience rather than increasing the rate of frequency, the rate of trial, and dialing up the experience. So it was not an easy process, but we reshaped the menu for the right channel in order for us to maximize the guest experience, right? So data through the digital ecosystem, and how do you capitalize it? Channels, where do you focus your efforts given the change of rules of the game? And then portfolio, how do you use the right menu for those channels that are available and the channels that people are going to be coming to?
That's wonderful, and I can completely relate to that. When you get into a Burger King, or any food store, actually, when you get there, the visual component is so important. The atmosphere component, everything what you see in what other people are eating, what you see in the billboards, what you see, the way the menu, the physical menu is presented. And it's completely true. When you are on your phone, it's a different experience. So things that maybe were really nice to look at, like that new big guacamole burger that you could see, in a huge, I don't know, a million pixels by a million pixels. Now in your phone, it looks very small, and maybe it's not as sexy as it looked
Correct.
in the on the billboard. So that's super interesting. That's wonderful. And when it comes to portfolio strategy, then obviously you've talked about what are the key things that need to be only in maybe in the mobile experience. Now that we come back to more of a normal life, do we go back to the portfolio that we had before? Are customers already kind of used to this new portfolio or this new selection of portfolio, so we don't come back? And let me kind of double click into that question. And if you can tell us a little bit more about portfolio strategy, and what are the other key components are there to make really to kind of nail a great portfolio strategy, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think this is one point that we can clearly talk about. I have a strong passion for how to manage a complex portfolio and how to ensure that portfolio serves the needs, but it's not too proliferated or not too lean that you're, not satisfying the customers or the guests' needs. When it comes to the first question, are we going back to the past world? I think COVID taught us a lot of lessons, right? And the more I would say that the time, as time went by, and people were starting to go back to the streets and to the restaurants and exiting, they were craving their long gone experiences of sitting in a restaurant, right? So wanting to have this experience of just sitting with friends and with family and ordering a Whopper or a I don't know, original chicken sandwich from BK, or even dipping their fries in their sundae, just because that's the way they want to eat, and have it your way. So I could tell you that our portfolio, it did suffer some changes, but I would say that in an 80%, we're back to where we were before, because it's clearly connected to people wanting to have their dishes back where I mean, we're back to normal life, right? So we have an ongoing cycle of portfolio optimization. That's not new. That's not due to COVID. That's something that we do in general, because that's what allows you to have innovation pipeline. It allows you to bring new items, allows you to enter the different segments or emerging trends like plant-based, for example. So portfolio optimization has been there since the beginning, right? So that hasn't changed. But I would say that we're back to our core menu, and the testing never ends. I think that, I mean, the consumer trends and the guests are eternally changing and evolving. So that's one thing that, COVID or not, we will continue to be understanding, analyzing, and changing continuously. And to the second question of having the right portfolio strategy, I think you need to, first of all, understand where you are, right? What's your current and existing portfolio? If I connect it to my current role right now, we're actually working in a portfolio strategy right now that has to do with favorites. And the analysis that we're running right now is how do we cross a set of different variables that allows us to understand what are these products that are more iconic to the brand, right? And first you need to understand what are the KPIs that you have available, right? In our case, we have how good we're able to execute these products, because people rate their experience in BK. If Lucas visits any BK in Australia, you will be able to rate the order. How was the Whopper? Was it good? Was the value for money what you expected? Was the taste amazing or not, etc.? So that's one variable that we have, and that allows us to know how our products rank when it comes to the execution of the product. And we also have the sales, right? So when you combine the two, you have a clear matrix to understand what are your biggest and more iconic products. Second, what are the products that have opportunities when it comes to product performance, so to say? And then what are these sleeping beauties that when you prepare them very well, but they may lack they may lack love, right? Or investment from media for you to really capitalize on this and make the size of the pie bigger. So, I mean, you need to clearly understand where you are, define what are the different product clusters that you want to clusterize your portfolio in, and then make the required action plan based on the outcome of the analysis, right? So I think it's, and I have seen this, I mean, of course, you analyze different variables depending on the category that you work in. If I relate back to my time in consumer goods, it would be more related to crossing distribution, right? Mm-hmm. With the size of the price, right? Size of how much volume you sold. In our case right now is how big is the sales of the product crossed with how good are we preparing the product. And that gives you a sense of where you have the opportunities, either from how do you potentialize this, or how do you improve the way you are preparing the product, check if the ingredients are right, check if you need to improve the performance of the product itself by changing the formula or whatever. So these components will give you the recipe for you to land in an action plan, and that action plan is what will eventually result in a portfolio strategy that it's ever changing as well, but at least it's a good starting point for you to start moving forward.
Awesome. I love the concept of the sleeping beauty and trying to identify those, because as in any business, sometimes we believe that we have the superpowers and we really understand and we know what consumers want because we listen to them, but sometimes they're telling us something and we just can't see it. So it's having the right tools to kind of pinpoint those. Here at the Strategy Factory, I have the chance of interviewing top leaders like yourself from different categories and different industries around the world. And one of the questions that I'm really passionate about is what happens in different cultures, in different geographies. How do you manage your kind of localness feel in every Burger King, and how do you empower those teams on the ground to execute what you guys come up with? Obviously, I imagine you have strategic directors in every single geography, but you still have headquarters, and a lot of these ideas come from headquarters, but then you have to push them through to all of the different geographies. So how do you make that Burger King experience unique to every geography and every culture around the world?
I think you bring a great topic, Lucas, and if we connected to the question before, I love this concept of something that we call local jewels, right? So we talked about Sleeping Beauties, we talked about global blockbusters or flagship products, but there's also this concept about local jewels. And these local jewels can be products that are rooted very, very strongly into the local context or the local flavor. If I relate it to fast food, to the local, it can be an ingredient, it can be a sauce, it can even be a character, sometimes that are connected to a local celebrity, right? And these are clear local jewels. I think when managing a global brand and managing a global portfolio, it's all about balance, right? Because you will always benefit more when you dedicate the majority of the resources to the things that are more iconic and more distinctive for the brand. Call it the Whopper, the original chicken sandwich, the plant-based Whopper. We have discovered over time that, being the first brand that started offering something plant-based in the menu, people relate to BK for that, right? And if you look at the level of sales of Impossible or plant-based, it's not necessarily very big, but people have a huge awareness for it, right? So you need to understand, first of all, which are your more distinctive products, focus the majority of the resources there, because that's what's going to drive the majority of brand awareness and brand love, right? But then there's also the concept of how do you balance, and going back to my point on balance, enough budget, love, time, and effort for the local jewels that are going to ensure that your brand is as relevant as it can be on a local basis, right? And I can talk about a few examples of when I was leading the work in Mexico. We always focused on a pipeline that had the right balance between executing global innovation and communication campaigns and initiatives, but also we had a very formal cadence of when and how to launch local flavor, right? And we launched mango habanero, for example, a hamburger that had this very, very spicy sauce that it performed really, really well. And it also gave us a lot of possibilities when it comes to the creative angle. In BK, we tend to be, we tend to love moving out of the comfort zone when it comes to the creative side, right? So how do you combine this local flavor from a culinary angle, but also from a creativity angle? So we have a cadence where at least 3 times a year, we had these windows where we executed local flavor items. And we did, I have several examples. We did mango habanero, we did guacamole crunch king, which was this hamburger, which was delicious, part of our premium line that had 2 meat patties. It had guacamole sauce, crispy onions, and jalapenos, and it helps you connect with the local flavor and the local culinary culture, I would say, right? So, and it's a balance. People will love the combination of the two. Sometimes they will go for the classic and order a Whopper or a Rodeo King or a Bacon King, but there's always sometimes where people, in Mexico, the team is about to launch something that is mandarina spicy chicken sandwich, for example, right? And it is made out of local peppers that with this very, very particular sauce, and it's a very connected with the Mexican culture, right? And also seen this type in other areas of the world. For example, in Asia, the sriracha portfolio works very well because it's very rooted in the culture of some of the Asian countries, right? So it's literally a balance, but I think, a global brand needs to have that combination and that balance, right? Because it needs to be relevant globally, but it needs to be connected to the local flavor, especially in a category like fast food, which is a day-to-day category, right? If you isolate yourself and stick to only the global angle and the global winners, then you prevent yourself of being intrinsic in the day-to-day culture. And clearly in fast food, you need to do the other, quite the opposite. You want to be top of mind and in the set of consideration in any given day.
That's awesome. And I think the key word here that you said is relevance, right? You need to stay relevant to the local communities because obviously there is a world trend and there are many things that are kind of recognized worldwide, the Whopper being obviously one of them. But if you don't have that unique distinction that make the local people feel like, hey, that's like us. That's like, I really relate to that. That is the winner. That is the winner, say the winner chicken or the winner part. So that's great. Guillermo, as we wind down into the last bit of our conversation, obviously you talked about different geographies, but not about necessarily new markets or new segments. So where I want to kind of end up our conversation is talking about that. What about entering new markets or new segments? How do you do that? What are the key things that we need to be aware of? And obviously, how do we decide where to put our eggs?
Right. No, it's a great question, Lucas, because this is always the the paradox, right? These emerging trends are usually small when it comes to size, right? The size of a price is small, but if you're the first one there, you have the first mover's advantage, right? And I think it's a matter of, first of all, doing a proper assessment, trying to understand how are the consumer trends shaping, right? It will have an element of data, science, and you will be able to back it up with data. But there's also the element of having a hunch and betting on something, right? Because the data will only give you so much information for you to know what's growing, right? And of course, if it's growing, a lot of brands and companies will go that way, right? But there's clearly this element of doing a proper analysis, understanding how these trends are evolving, how are guests changing when it comes to, in our case, taste habits. I mean, I think plant-based is the best example of that, right? As mentioned, we were the first brand to offer within fast food a plant-based menu, and there's great examples of markets like France, where, I mean, we first did a plant-based Whopper, then we launched plant-based chicken, and the plant-based chicken proposition sold 5 times more than the Whopper, right? But the Whopper is more iconic. So you get these surprises along the way that clearly have, you won't be able to predict all of these things, right? So it's a matter of testing and learning, right? And in a brand as global as BK, you need to take these bets, push for them, ensure that obviously when you're gonna make a bet, you have enough data to back it up, right? Go, place a bet, ensure that you execute properly, and then be ready for rollout, right? If it's working out, be sure to be able to roll it out fast to continue having this first mover advantage in as many markets as possible. But also, and most importantly, be aware that you may need to back up, because it may be the case that it was a bet that didn't work. And it's a constant in this marketing game, because you will never be able to win all your bets. Otherwise, imagine that scenario, right? So I think it has to do with a combination of several factors, but also having the resilience to be able to bet and be consistent about it, right? You don't want to push for something, back off, and then eventually the trend picks up and you miss the wave because you weren't patient enough.
That's great. And what really resonated is this idea of having that innovative mind and having that innovative trait of doing things, and being able to celebrate the wins and say, hey, we've done this really well, let's expand. But also to say, we missed on this one. And I guess that might be probably something very enrooted in BK's culture, which is try fast, fail faster. And I guess that's what probably makes it so relevant and makes Burger King such an incredible worldwide brand, because everyone is ready for that. Everyone's ready for action, but also everyone's probably ready to say, hey, I don't think this one has
failure.
Worked. For failure.
For failure and course correcting. Totally.
Mistakes. I don't know. I have this discrepancy where I think failure and mistakes are different, because everyone makes mistakes. I think failure is the inability to act. But True. When you act and you don't get it right, that's more of a mistake than a failure. But that's I think a discussion.
Totally.
That's a discussion for some other time. Guillermo, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't, or anything else that you would like to say before we close our conversation?
I think, just to close, a thought here around how the marketing world is ever changing, right? I think I would invite the audience to really move away from their comfort zone when it comes to strategy, right? The moment you feel comfortable with something, call it the portfolio strategy, call it the culinary beliefs of your brand, or call it the brand principles. The moment you feel comfortable, you run the risk of becoming transparent, irrelevant. There's many adjectives out there. So I think, this passion about feeling uncomfortable about things in a positive way, I think it needs to drive the right mindset to be able to change things, to evolve, and to really, brands are ever changing, trends are ever changing, and most importantly, consumers, and in our case, guests, are ever changing. So there's this notion of never feeling comfortable with what you have, not because, you need to have this sense of accomplishment, but at the same time, you need to feel that things are going to change around you. So the faster you adapt to the rules of the game, or the faster you rewrite the rules of the game, the faster brand will be on top of the trends, the guests, the frequency, the sales, and obviously the brand love and awareness.
Love it. Rewriting, adapting, key concepts, very important. Mr. Guillermo, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think our audience will take a lot from this talk that we just had. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and I hope to also talk to you very soon.
Thank you very much, Lucas.
Have a great day.